All right. So the last video was on how to do a still life, and this video I'm going to actually sit down and start sketching out a. We're going to sketch out basically this this bad boy here, and it's off of one of the still life references that I've got. You can get that at the blog post I have, and I'll give you a link for that. And yeah, so let's start this. So first things first, I've sped the video up for about 400%. I'm using just a simple number 2 pencil, or HB pencil, and a regular white sheet of printer paper. Nothing special. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to block out my shapes. I'm not worried about details. I'm worried more about two things. One, the overall shape. And then two, the kind of placement of the objects and how they relate to each other in the individual concept. Now, I'm blocking out the eyes here, and that's giving me a little bit more kind of direction. And I'm using it as landmarks. So I'm comparing, how far the eyes are away from how far the mouth is away from how far like the book is away from it itself. So I'm like measuring components back and forth. And if you notice, as I go, I am erasing, and it's okay to not get things right in the first kind of time. You have to build up that skill to understand the visual relationship and how to kind of repeat that. And so you can see I'm really going through adjusting things. I'm making the book larger and kind of working more on shape. And that's all I'm really focusing on at this point is the overall proportions of everything and is the overall shapes of everything working well. And you can see here that what I'm doing is slowly cutting things out. Cutting it out and erasing it, or extending it and then erasing it, and building up that kind of proportion. And as I work further, my line work gets a little bit more defined. And you can see here is kind of where the line work is relatively defined. And now I'm just kind of nitpicking and starting to add in a little bit more of the landmark details, like, the ovals and the other aspects of my sketching. And here you can start seeing I'm using the side of my pencil just to lay down some thick black tones. And what I'm doing there is ultimately just looking at the initial drawing and kind of working accordingly. And with that in mind, what I'm doing is I'm getting a value range going on. I'm picking the darkest areas and I'm slowly darkening them up. I'm not putting in tons of black right away. I'm just building up the black as the darkest values right away, because that'll change how I look at the rest of the drawing. So with that in place, then I'm just starting to kind of block in things a little bit more. I'm pressing a little bit harder on the pencil itself to give me a little bit more darkness in the lead. Notice my other hand is really holding down the paper. If you want, you can tape this down, but for as quick as I did this, I just wanted a simple sketch. And you can see that I'm drawing little things like the reflection of the skull in the wine bottle. I'm adding in, more defined details. I'm blocking out larger forms. So here I'm grabbing what would be considered the lighter part of this, and I'm just basically shading in the darks. And then what I'm doing is I'm using my finger to kind of blend things together. You can use a blending stump if you want. I use my finger all the time. I just make sure I wipe it off before I start actually drawing, because it'll get rid of some of those oils, and the oils will leave a fingerprint. So when you smudge, just make sure your finger is kind of oil free. Like I said, otherwise you can use a stump or other things like that. And again, I'm just using the idea of a simple kind of shade to kind of build up things. And then I'm removing highlights with the eraser itself. And so you can see me just kind of grab things in there and smudge them. Now my goal isn't to create a final finished piece. It's more of just a representation and a practice exercise to get the proportions and that kind of information down. This is something that I could later turn into a painting, or I could also later work with, kind of other aspects of this. I'm smoothing out mainly the glass, and I'm leaving the skull as much more kind of defined because the skull has a rougher texture to it. And also as I build my values up, so I'm darkening things and I'm kind of pushing things lighter and darker to push things from the background in, and I'm trying to push things from the foreground closer. So you'll see at some points in time, like I'm darkening the background, and that's pushing the wine bottle or the wine glass forward. And as I darken the background, and it separates the elements as well. There's other places too, like the back of the skull. You'll notice that when I get to that section, I really don't focus too much on separating the elements because it's kind of a lost edge. And again, just defining the little points, using the line work to kind of separate things, and again, kind of smudging that background just to push the skull forward or the wine bottle backwards. And then I'm just kind of going through and kind of really quickly playing around with the teeth, getting those in there. Again, this is a kind of not a realistic skull, so I'm just kind of getting those ideas in there real quick. And then ultimately, I'm essentially getting close to done here. I'm going to darken the background and separate the background element from everything else. So you can see I'm just kind of sketching and shading out, and that's more of a composition thing, so that way the background pushes everything else a little bit forward. And from there, I'm pretty much done. So I hope you guys like this, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments.